Okay, so as Val mentioned, my name is John Shaw. I work for a company named Jagger. Jagger is a supply management solution provider. We are an enterprise SaaS company, approximately $250 million in revenue. We serve a wide array of clients. Clients could be Fortune 500 companies, governmental organizations, all of whom have a lot of discretionary spend available. So when I say discretionary spend, I mean things that are not like payroll or taxes. So if you're a manufacturer, you need product, you need direct materials to go into your production line. If you're a government agency, you spend a lot of money on services. So we work with these companies to understand what opportunities do they have to get more value out of that spend and that supply base, and ultimately bring systems and tools in place to manage that relationship. So that would be doing analytics on where they're spending their dollars, helping them to source new supply, measuring the performance of those contracts after they're formed, scorecarding those suppliers, developing them from there. Interestingly, there's a lot of parallels to what happens in supply management and customer success, in that in supply management, procurement spends a lot of time segmenting the supply base and developing out different strategies and plays to develop out those different segments. It's very similar to what we're doing here in customer success, segmenting our customers, figuring out what our goals to get value for that particular segment, and developing it. So that's the overall company, Jagger. My perspective in giving this talk is one of having gone through about 18 years of growth in this industry with procurement. I've been with the organization for 19 or 18 years. I've been doing it for 19, sorry. And been through about 9 acquisitions through that, either acquiring or being acquired. So a bit of this is an acquisition story, and that's what you're going to see as one of the main drivers for the monetization play. Because I really believe that in a consolidating industry like we're at, that having any department clearly monetized and you can document the value that they're providing is going to provide a better outcome for everybody, for the customer, for the employees, for the rest of the organization. So before I go in, I have a question for you. Could you guys show me by a show of hands who sells customer success services or has a monetization approach? Of everybody who didn't raise their hand, is there anyone in here planning on doing it but haven't done it yet? Okay. Well, that's really where we're at. We're in that bucket. So we're right in the beginning of launching that. And I think there's a pretty interesting interplay here, and I'll leave you guys a moment to read this quote from TSIA. So I think there's an interplay between selling success services and still maintaining that trusted advisor relationship and figuring out how to balance that. I think that's an important theme for us to keep our eye on going forward. But I really believe this is in the best interest of the customer as well as the company. And my experiences, as I'll show you as I tell the story, will at least play out why I've arrived at that conclusion. Whether that's the right conclusion or not, that varies per environment. Okay, so this is a story of 3, maybe 4 companies. The one in the upper left-hand corner, a company named SideQuest, was acquired by Jagger about a year ago. You're looking at about a $100 million enterprise SaaS company focused on the procure-to-pay portion primarily of procurement. So that's the purchase orders, the invoices, the shipments, the receipts, all the transactional documents that pass between a supplier and a buyer. And then you go down to bottom to Bravo Solution. Bravo is about a $90 million company, extremely customer-centric. I think it was 5 times leading the Magic Quadrant in customer focus. That's where I come from, and that was about, again, a $90 million company focused on the strategic portion of sourcing. So that's more about finding the right supply and making the right decisions. So they've come together over the period of about a last year and a half to become a company named Jagger, and that's what we'll talk about in Act 3, what we're doing as an organization going forward. So if we go to SideQuest and we start there, this is a story I'm telling second-handed since I wasn't there. SideQuest had developed out a robust client partner program. It mostly focused on the education sector, which is essentially was the cash cow within the organization, so providing P2P solutions into higher education. They basically established the program. You can see some of the components of the program here. They funded it based upon just a clip level, a certain ARR level, and they would assign a client partner. The team grew quite successfully up to 17 client partners. A tremendous amount of stories and expectations and positive feelings from the clients. As I'm meeting clients who've had this program in the past, they want it back, and I'll talk a bit about how it became diluted. But a pretty mature operational process. But really, when they went through the experience of being acquired, so they were a public company, they got taken private. Private equity came in and was really looking at answering 3 key questions for everyone in the organization. Can you demonstrate to me specifically how you contribute to revenue? And the answer was no, right? There was no clear tie between that team and revenue. Can you demonstrate to me customer renewals? Stories, yeah. Stories, customers would vouch for the value of it, but there was no model. There was no way to sit down and say, this organization has run these plays. This was the risk review process when a client was at risk. These are the plays that we ran. This is how it reconciled it. This was our save rate. This is how this results to saved ARR. None of that infrastructure was in place. And when you can't answer the top 2 questions, you're a cost center, right? You're there as a cost center, and they couldn't answer the profitability question either. So the solution at the time was to take a team which was designed and built as an output of customer support, and move that over into the sales organization. And in no way am I proposing that a success team can't be in a sales organization. It depends upon the context and the goals and the mandate of that particular team. But for these individuals, it didn't work. This was not a sales team. These were not folks that were comfortable with a quota. Some of the team was reduced during the acquisition, and about another half of it left, leaving a core of about 4 people behind from that 17. And I believe, looking back, if they had been able to answer those questions differently, it would be a different scenario today. So if we go to Bravo's solution, so again, this is roughly similar size organization. That advanced for you. A slightly different challenge. So I will say that all these numbers in here are roughly directional, but nothing's accurate. So I wanted to use the numbers to illustrate the rough scale of what we were talking about, but like other presenters, I can't put the actual numbers up here. So we had a couple of problems. One of the primary ones was really growing the US market. So the organization had grown profitably, 10% growth or so for 15 years. Not exactly going gangbusters, but a solid performing company within our shareholders' portfolio. But really the piece we were looking at was the market share available in the US and really developing that out. And we were struggling in that area largely because the account management teams were buried back in the accounts. They weren't really farming. They really weren't developing out new opportunities and contacts. They were operating and trying to keep the customers happy. The natural output of that is that their account managers, they're intelligent people, they start pulling in any other resources that they can to try to solve whatever customer problem is in front of them. So professional services starts getting pulled in, right? Utilization rates are going down because we can't roll people off projects and onto new billable work. So everything was a little bit rough in terms of getting everybody to right role clarity and performing against the objectives of those roles. So we sat back, and at the time this seemed, I'll be honest, incredibly logical. And we said, let's go through the client base. Let's look at the roughly $12 million book of revenue. Let's sit down with sales and figure out not just what the total white space is or potential upsell opportunity, but what's the realistic white space. We came up with that rough number there of about $20 million. We looked at the account management team. We figured out some of the skill sets and moved some people out of the organization. Some others were going to go into CS. So our net investment, we figured we could get another 20% penetration on that white space. It was about $2 million for about another $150,000, $200,000 of investment. So it seemed like a no-brainer, right? We start down that process, and we start putting a lot of infrastructure in place. So on the people side, we hire our customer success director. We figure out what our engagement model is going to be with customer success analysts, CSMs, et cetera. We define our life cycle. We start organizing the company around the life cycle and running projects off of it. We look to Tango as a partner from a technology perspective, establish a health model, start to look at software integration with our own platforms and how to bring them in. We're doing our voice of the customer programs, taking off. We're adding a lot of content, and those 3 questions came back, right? So we went through the acquisition. While we were in the due diligence process, and it was about 6 or 7 months, anything that didn't answer those questions was on hold, right? So we just everything ground to a halt. Because still, we couldn't directly tie to existing revenue, right? We couldn't directly tie to the existing renewals yet. And same with the profitability as the last time, right? We're seen as a cost center. So that's where we ended up. And now we move forward to Act 3. Right? So now as we're rebuilding and relaunching, it's not advancing. These 3 questions are going to sit at the front of what we're doing, right? So from a revenue perspective, we've gone out and done some analytics, and I'll give you a little bit of a peek at that to look at what it looked like if we went after 30 to 50% of our customers with customer success packages, and I'll go into a little bit more detail on them. From a renewal perspective, really getting those measurement processes in place, getting everything buttoned down in terms of understanding how are we looking at customer health, how are we looking at risk, what plays are we running, how does that tie to the save rate, and really laying that foundation in. So by the end of the year, we should have a really clearly documented trail of how customer success is contributing to renewals. We don't actually own the renewal, the account manager owns the renewal, but we manage the risk process around it. And then profitability, every project that comes out of our life cycle, and I think many of us have been through acquisitions, 3 different companies coming together, because there was another $50 million one in that portfolio too. Everybody does things differently, right? So how we do handoff from professional services to support is different between all these different companies. Our financial metrics are pretty variable across them. So every one of these projects that we're doing off of the life cycle, we're going to come back to some of these key measures. You know, we're improving profitability, are we helping revenue, helping renewals, and making sure that those projects and programs are run in a way that documents it. This is a snapshot of the success packages. So we're at the point now where we've vetted it with a number of strategic customers, sat down. We've got a developing pipeline. Everything seems to be moving quite well, and we hope to close the first couple packages within the next week or 2. So I know it's kind of small. On the upper left-hand corner is a success package is a set of recurring services, and they're delivered out of professional services and support. So from the top, it's success monitoring, voice of the customer, new user onboarding, user enablement, new release communications, user support, supplier support, and this says starting points. So that's the amount of points you get in the package. There's another line in there that's additional call routing capabilities and premium support packages that I didn't squeeze into that. So that recurring portion is all delivered out of the customer success and the customer support team. The customers are then given a set of points with their package that they consume against a la carte services. Those a la carte services can change over time, right? But right now they're representative of a lot of optimization services from professional services. We have to connect a lot of suppliers into the network from a procurement perspective, so they can pay some points to get a supplier connected. And essentially, where the bottom piece I want it to move is to clear outcome-based services. Whereas they get the success package, they can look down to the a la carte menu and see how they can drive more value by calling off all these different points. Outside of this slide, there's another program around references and speaking at conferences, things like that. They can let the marketing team put more points in their bucket, and the account management team as well that they can consume back against this framework. This chart over here, this is, again, it's fake but directional. That's why I wrote fake ARR in there in the key. But if you look at the lines, so the pricing model pretty much says that there's a fixed price. So let's just say right now, for argument's sake, that for a premium package, you would pay $15,000 minimum, or $25,000 minimum, sorry, and then if you go up at 15% of ARR as you scale. So as we get the customer and we move out across multiple modules, they're going to take more for us to support, that scales appropriately. And then the Premier Plus package is a little bit higher than that. So we went through and did some analysis to look at what's the percentage of the customer base that we think is ready to buy now. We've got we're organized into verticals. The vertical leads developing out those pipelines. And that should be driving the funding model. And then back on the customer success staffing perspective, we're estimating 60% of the CSA's time on success package delivery, another 10% or so on admin, and that other 20% we're going to start moving down the tail in services that are high touch. Low touch. So all the automation and low touch. Because I ultimately need customer success to cover everything. Right? I just need to make sure that I'm doing it at a sufficient margin that I can reinvest some of those dollars back into servicing the rest of the customers, starting to put the infrastructure in place, starting to get to some economies in scale, right? And then reinvesting some of that elsewhere. So that's the general framework we're all aligned and launching to. This is just a snapshot of the risk process. So was was unfortunate for the risk assessment. I couldn't put the Tatango view up because the slides were due last week, and we just moved Tatango from one Salesforce instance to another. But that is and will be next week a Tatango view. So we're using the health within Tatango to understand risk. We trigger health alerts. Those health alerts then go to a CSA. CSA contacts the AM. They work on the play. And I'm trying to move it so that the play process and the play review is not just everybody's on a call and just throws out ideas, right? But we're looking at this particular play was run, was it good, wasn't it, and what was the save rate. So that's all starting to move. And then, as I mentioned earlier, we have a customer lifecycle. And that customer lifecycle has a series of projects that are spinning off. That's a cross-functional team with representatives from all the subsidiaries coming together, defining out what that future lifecycle would look like, doing all the roles and responsibilities matrix and understanding the future process, and then just peeling off a whole bunch of sub-projects underneath it that we put in a big project management portfolio. So that's how that process is running, and that's already starting to make a difference. So at least for me and for Jagger, when we come back to the beginning and we ask that question, to monetize or not monetize, our answer is absolutely yes. This is where we need to be in the environment that we're operating in. And I truly believe that as we do this, it'll give us so much more opportunity to be even better to our customers. And it's something that's always been really deep in our DNA. And I think one of the things, at least on the Bravo side, that I've always been proud of is how we figure it out, right? We had to make it happen is one of our values. And you figure out how to make the customer happy, but to do it at scale, right, and to do it with the right tools and the right resources just provides so much more opportunity for both organizations, us and our customers, to be successful. So it's very exciting. And I guess for everyone in the room, there's still questions, I think, for you, right? Is this a right process for you? For us, a lot of it had to do with the macro environment, around us and what our funding model looked like. If I reflect back on the time when we were building it at Bravo, we checked all the boxes. The board agreed, right? The CEO agreed. Everybody, the whole entire company was lined up. We went around the table, and everyone was 100% behind it. That group of leadership isn't here anymore, right? But the team still is. So, I'd say if you're in that environment where, you're looking to advocate for your customers, protect your customers, make sure that your team's present no matter what happens and changes around, that thinking about monetization and thinking about how can you prove that you're delivering those results is going to put you in a much, much better position to take care of those customers. And like I said, for me, that's what I'm passionate about. And if I need to monetize a program to be able to succeed at that, then that's the path we're going to take. So that's my presentation. Any questions? Yeah, go ahead. I saw you. Oops. No problem. I'll take a sip of water.
So I saw your packaging model, and I noticed you had 3 different price points. You had a kind of 0, Premier, and Premier Plus. How are those prices proportional to your average sales price of the service itself? And then what are the attach rate expectations you have for selling those packages?
So the portions are really developed. So the pricing, and I make sure I understand it, that the price point that we're picking is based upon a segment of customers that we want to go after. There's a particular segment, our downstream P2P one. They're the larger ARR customers. And they've been asking for a lot of things like this. So we've got some proof points with them. I'd say it's not as mathematical as I would like it to be. They're standing there saying, let's go, when can you put this in front of me? We've put some proposals in front of them in the past that were like that, but there was never a team or function to execute upon it. So less than scientific, to be quite transparent.
The reason I asked it is we've tried some similar things in a couple of companies, and what I found, and I wonder if you have, is we built attach models and we built staffing and capacity plans assuming those attach models, like 50% of my customers will take this or something. And then what we had hoped is our risk was on the downside, we wouldn't get the attach rate. What happened was our sales wanted to attach it to every deal because proportionally it was a small amount, and we started having capacity struggles. So I wondered what your experience was.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, maybe it's a bit naive, but I'm hoping for that, right? I mean, it's the...
Careful what you wish.
Yeah, so we've certainly gone out with the models and with each of the package and looked at estimates, and we know what the ratio of FTE time that we need to support each package compared to the number of customers they can handle. So that's all baked out. keeping the kind of control on the gas in the first quarter is going to be a lot of the trick of it, because I still have I have 2 FTEs set aside to begin the program. So we're hiring them and bringing them in, and then I've got a proof point with the board after that to say, do we really go from there? But I do think that there's absolutely some risk there, that the portfolio that we're targeting will outstrip our ability to deliver on it. Thank you for the question.
Hello. Good presentation. Thank you. 2 quick unrelated questions. One is about the role of account managers. So you mentioned that they have a role for renewal. Besides renewal, what is their role on active accounts? So that's question number 1.
Okay.
And question number 2, what would you do if you really have a customer that want to be successful, but they somehow refuse to pay the package, which will be right, kind of, maybe like, yeah, that's...
Okay. So the first question with regard to the account managers, they're responsible for the revenue numbers, both the renewal and the upsell. So they've got a number to hit on each year, and we don't have that under customer success. In terms of finding a way to service customers who either can't afford these packages or aren't in the target market, there's a couple of dimensions to that. The first is we're starting to build out a strategic success program on the side, which requires really executive approval to get into. And those are customers we're just going to invest in. We're going to put a strategic success manager out there and just do it because it's the right thing to do for that type of relationship. So I'm a little less worried about the big customers because the recognition is there. I think the trick's going to be the tail, is getting the funding and getting the model moving so that when we get down to the smaller customers, that we can bring those capabilities down. And that's a lot of work to tango, and building automation comes into play, and why we're building it from day one instead of building this as more of a high touch model without automation, because I know that question's coming next, right? We've got to figure out how do we get down to that tail. So it's basically, move down in the tail with the automation, and then make sure that we've got a bucket of time set aside for the really strategic clients to be able to be flexible. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks very much. Appreciate the presentation. Can you talk a little bit about discounting, if you do it, how you do it, how that works as a sales cycle, thing like, just kind of any thoughts you might have about that and how it works into this program?
I think we haven't really gotten there yet. It's pretty much where we're at. We know with the cost, the base cost, what it's going to cost us to deliver. And the sales team, so maybe this helps, but with the way that we're coming together, one of the organizations had central price models, and the other organization allowed each of the portfolios, so they were country portfolios, to all price on their own. So our operating model was all one of cost, and then that local sales team would figure out the pricing, and then the P&L would wash out in their P&L at the end of the year. So I don't think we as a success organization have matured yet to start working on that revenue side. It's always been, this is what it costs, this is how we're going to bill you back in our company at the end of it, and general manager, that's for you to handle to figure out whether you're going to discount it or not. Sure.
Do we have another question?
That's another one that's coming I got to figure out, though. This is like my prep for the future session. Come on, keep them coming.
So in your organization, it's the salespeople, so account executives, right, that sell the support packages? Or does it ever fall on the customer success to sell those as well?
No, you're right. You asked if my organization is selling the success packages, right? No, that's the account managers are selling it. I'm trying to create that kind of bifurcation of responsibility so that we keep that trusted advisor role. And then I want the CSM to be proposing consuming points that exist already, so that they can still look at the customer and deliver value and say, look, you've got 50,000 points here, and your scorecarding process is very inefficient. Let me book a consultant to come in. We'll do an analysis of your current process and propose how we can configure and improve it, so that they're utilizing those services and they're delivering them as a CSM, but they're not sitting here saying,
you should buy this.
Here's a statement of work. Yeah.
So if a customer comes up to your CSM and say, hey, I need help with X, Y, and Z, and this is truly something that's a paid support, Does then the CSM go to sales and say, hey, you guys need help? You need to sell it?
It depends if the points are there or not. So if the points are there, it becomes a booking process.
Right.
Like if professional
If there's no
services
points.
wants it, we just put it in the booking system and say, they want this engagement, and we schedule it and they execute it, and then we're keeping track in Salesforce of the points. We need to figure something out a little bit more efficient than that from a point collection standpoint and tracking, but it'll get us started in this first.
But if there's no points, the account has no points, then it has to be purchased.
Yeah, so they can purchase points. So this part's new territory for us. So the way that we did the points is, if you think about like a frequent flyer program, in a frequent flyer program, the higher you move up in the status, the quicker you earn points, but we all spend points at the same rate, right? So in the same way, if you're a non-subscribing customer, you're going to pay the face price for the points, right? And you can just buy those a la carte points and consume those services. But if you're a Premier or Premier Plus customer, you're getting those points at a discount, right? So what I'm trying to do with that is shift. I don't want to charge a fee to the non-subscribing customers, but in a sense, that's really what we're doing, right? It doesn't appear that way. They're just paying a premium on the point.
And with the premium customers, do they start off, when the contract is signed initially, do they automatically purchase a support package, or is it more of an add-on throughout the process, or if the sales executive can persuade them to purchase it now, they do it?
So haven't gotten to prospects yet, so this is theory. I don't want to give anybody fake information. We're starting with existing customers where we know we have demand for those packages. From a new customer perspective, I absolutely want the AEs or account executives attaching these services. And I'm even very open to looking at the customer and doing like a 6-month program and discounted or for free, and then it kicks in and you pay for it after a while. Because I think there's going to be a lot of scenarios where we're going to have to get flexible, where we know that the program is in the best interest of both organizations, but where we're at in the sales cycle and where we're at in the budgeting cycle is not going to allow us to do it. But a lot of those problems, they're like the CEO is sitting there saying, I'm not going to give you any more people until you sell something, right? So getting the engine moving right now, and I don't mean to be short-sighted or myopic, like that's really the big piece, right? Just getting this new leadership team to look at this and go, yes, I can see how, if you take it and you look at the percent of ARR that we can add, and we're putting this under subscription revenue. So from a valuation perspective, we're owned by venture capital. They're going to sell the company at some point, right? That's what venture capital does. So if we're able to start getting the executive team to start seeing this as an expansion of the overall valuation by moving that over, then some of this stuff I think will just start moving quicker. And then there'll be a lot of late nights solving some of the problems you guys are asking me about.
Well, you figure it out.
Yeah.
Yep.
So if account management or account executives are owning the revenue, the direct revenue, so renewals and upsells, all of that, how are you correlating your customer success managers to the revenue growth, the renewals, and the profitability piece? What are you using to do that?
Okay, so revenue growth is just going to be direct success packages, right? It's going to be these are direct. So putting the support and the success team in the recurring portion defends that for me. So the points I can show differently how the rest of the organization is consuming those points. So that's like the most direct funding model. The next layer comes down to the health model. And putting a health model in place and understanding when we run plays, how that improves health, and then measuring from a health perspective how that correlates to renewals. That we need a data foundation for that. So we're putting all that in place, but I don't pretend to have that in 2018. I want to leave 2018 with at least a half year of data to start looking at that. We're on 3 to 5 year renewal cycles, so it's going to take some time to really get to a sufficient amount of data. And then there was a third question in there. I'm sorry, and I missed it. I forgot.
No, I think you caught it. It's trying to draw that line without, I think, the multiple points in between to make the argument around, like, to your point, like, this is not just a cost center, like, this is revenue producing. But when your customer success managers aren't directly owning those revenue transactions, it's a harder argument to make, I guess. So just how you're connecting those pieces.
Yeah, just getting the success package to say, look, every CSM we have is bring in $250,000 of revenue. We're paying them. I'm going to make up the numbers, but we're paying them a subset of that, and being able to look at a P&L and have a margin for the team. And even if that margin's a little bit lower than some of the other teams because we're covering some of these other programs, they're comfortable with that. So we're at about 20% lower of a target than the professional services team from a margin perspective, because they agree that we need to do other stuff beyond that.
So I apologize. We don't have any more time for any more questions.